Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is a celebrity, but a celebrity who you very seldom see. Instead, you hear his voice on WMOO radio in Derby. Our guest is Johnny Rice. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott.
How does it feel to be on this side, with a camera in front of you versus just a mic?
I don't know. I guess it's okay. You know, I used to work in TV, right, and I worked behind the camera, so I understand that. I don't know. I could have used a little hair and makeup, I suppose. But other than that, it feels pretty cool.
Yeah, but people say that if you work in radio, you have to have a face for radio. You do not have a face for radio.
Yeah,
I think you're quite I think you're quite a debonair-looking guy.
Oh, thank you, Scott. You know what it is? It's a little bit of beard action going on. You know, I'm trying to look the frosted look.
Right. You want to look distinguished.
That's it. Yes,
you
distinguished.
Want distinguished.
Yes.
Well, I wanted you to come on the show because I've actually worked with you at the radio station for like 12 or 13 years. And when the producer of this show, Todd Pronto, actually hired me at the station when he was there, and I could not go wrong on the price. I get double pay every year. They started me out at zero, and I get double pay, and 13 years later, I'm still not paid.
You know, yeah, it's kind of a weird loop. You know, Todd actually started the Vermont Voice.
Right.
Now I produce the Vermont Voice along with you, and now I'm on the Northeast Kingdom Voice, which is you and Todd's show.
Right.
So it's very odd. And yeah, the pay is the same at the station too. Yeah.
By
the way, you're getting a raise.
Oh, that's good. Double?
Yeah.
Okay, double, and it'll still be zero. So, so as I said, we've known each other for years, and one time I even, as you know, I put out on your Facebook, I wanted to know whether they've ever seen you lose your cool, your friends. And because you're always so calm. And, there's a big old thunderstorm outside, the roof is leaking, and you're just relaxed. And they said, that's who you are.
Well, yeah, I guess. I guess, as I've gotten older, I've learned to not sweat the small stuff.
Right.
I just take things a lot easier, and I got some health issues, so now I see things in a different light.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, hey, now, by the way, I love thunderstorms.
I do too.
Until a big old bolt of lightning hits next to me, and then I'm like in the house. But,
yeah.
But they're relaxing. But yeah, I've always, when I was younger, I might have been a little bit more excitable.
Right.
But as I've gotten older, I've learned to pace myself. Let's put it that way.
Right. We've even been we were recently on a show together on Vermont Public. Yeah, it was Vermont Public Radio. And as somebody said, in Vermont, when somebody, you've been here, 20 years?
Yes. Yeah.
20 years. And in other places, if you've lived there for 4 months, you're considered a local now. Yeah. And after 20 years, you're still viewed as a newcomer.
There's no localness in Vermont. The only way you could be a local in Vermont is if you are born here and you got family that was born here. I think if you move here and you have a child here, that child's not a local. You have to have like roots. That's what it seems like to me anyway.
Well,
which I think is cool, by the way.
And technically, I'm not a local because I don't have 5 generations. My father was born here, but his mother was born in Quebec, and the same through my mother's mother was born in Newfoundland, so I guess technically I'm not a local if you go back that 5 or 6 generation thing. But how did John Rice end up from Milford, Connecticut to the sticks of Lowell?
Well, a bittersweet story, I suppose, is what it is. My originally from Milford, Connecticut, which is a really nice little town. Todd will tell you about that. He's been there. It's a nice little town on Long Island Sound. My parents had bought a piece of land in Milford down the road from where we live and whatnot. And then we never did anything with it. We were going to, but we found out we really couldn't because it was like on a swamp or something like that. So my mother sold it as a wetland. My father had passed away, before the sale. So what happened was we had a big house in Milford, and we had some apartments on it, and we had a tenant who had moved in, and her and my mother took a trip up to Vermont because they wanted to check out this piece of property, and they saw this piece of property. It was 22 acres out in Lowell, and they decided to go half and half. So the rentee on my mom's house took 11 acres, and we took 11 acres. And then we decided, what are we going to do with this 11 acres? And then that's when we decided to take the money from that sale of the land and combine our money and build this log cabin, which we did. And I've been there for the last 20 years. Since my mother passed away in '97, I decided to move up here because we sold her house, our old house, down in Milford. So it's a little bit complicated. And like I said, bittersweet because, my mother loved the place. She did get a chance to come up and enjoy it for a few years, but then unfortunately in '97 she died in a car accident. And which was ironic because we were going to come up the weekend after, when she died, but the weekend we were planning to come up that weekend.
Right. You were mentioning that Todd knows Milford, Connecticut, and the only problem is when he was performing there, he didn't know that's exactly where you were living. He said because he would have name dropped you, and maybe they would have thrown some extra tips his way.
I don't know about that.
So you came. Have you worked for the radio station the entire time?
No, when I first came up here, I started at Hedma out in North Troy. It was a garment factory. They worked with like turtle fur and stuff like that. We made, pullovers and all kinds of interesting stuff. I worked there for a while, and then I got a part-time job at the radio station when I met Mr. Steele and the gang,
right?
Which was pretty cool.
Now, had you worked in radio before or only TV?
Just television. But I was a radio fan. I became a radio fan like in the 60s.
Right.
Because, before cable, I'm a sports guy, so I love sports. But so before cable, you could only catch a game every now and then on TV, and usually it was tape delayed or something like that. So I would listen to the radio, because you're right there in Milford. You get all the New York stations. So I would listen to all the baseball games, basketball, hockey games on radio. I'd lie there in bed with my little transistor radio on the windowsill and just like sort of fall asleep listening to Marv Albert call a Rangers game or a Knicks game or something like that.
Did you grow up with those? I'm not sure what they're called on radio, where they had the stories. They were like mystery theaters and everything. Because we were really at the end of that stuff because I do remember it, but. The generations before us, they grew up with a lot of these, mystery theaters and everything.
As a matter of fact, I do remember that, Scott, and I'm a very little older than you. Yeah. And yes, I remember listening to my parents on Sunday evening. Yeah. And for the life of me, like, where was our TV back then? Yeah. But Sunday evening we had this old brown Magnavox AM radio. FM hadn't been around yet. I think FM came around in 1970 or something like that. But we had this old brown radio, and we'd sit there. I'm not sure what we were listening to, but we were listening to something. Right. And I remember my mother sitting at the table, and my dad sitting there smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer, and kind of the old days,
Right. So you ever notice? It's funny. Our idea of age changes with time because do you remember when we were like 25, if we looked at somebody who was 60, it's like, holy cow, that's old. But now we're getting to be the age where if you think about it, we look at people who are 80 and 90 and think they've lived through a lot of changes. You know what? We're getting to the point where we're starting to say back when we were kids. And
yes.
So do you prefer radio over TV?
I've always loved radio, but it's changed over the years. It's not what it used to be. I loved the hustle and bustle of radio. If you watch like WKRP, that show there, that's an example of what I loved about radio back in the day. You had a bunch of DJs, a bunch of salespeople intermingling, and maybe not as comical as the show was, but you had a station bustling with people, stuff going on. Now it's a lot more automated. The music is pre-programmed. I still love radio, but maybe my love is a little bit tainted because of the way it's changed.
I actually, I've only been associated with the radio station 12, 13 years, and I've actually seen a tremendous change too. And I accept the fact that it's change. It has to happen probably, but there's not as many people, and there is a lot more automation because like a lot of people don't realize editing, because I tell people, because our show is recorded, such as this show, you're able to make me sound a lot smarter than I am because, and it looks like a heart monitor, you know, that you're watching my voice, and then you're able to take out ums and everything. But back when you began, were you still doing reel-to-reel stuff?
We did have a reel-to-reel player, and I did have to do a little bit of editing on that. Not a lot, but I did do a little bit. But for the most part, we had an archaic, I guess I don't even know if it was digital. Maybe it was analog, but it was an archaic editing system that I can't even remember the name of it. But it was like, let's say it was like Space Invaders compared to today's video games.
Right. You know, and it isn't only radio and TV that's changed either. Like I look at, because I write history, I go through a lot of old newspapers, and the old papers are just, they're heads and tails above what they are today. And the funny thing, every once in a while I'll read a complaint that the newspapers go too much into details with the tragedies. I'm like, oh my God, you ought to read some of these old newspapers. They went into details that were just, you know, would be totally unacceptable today. But you know, I when I read a newspaper, I still like to have it here in my hands.
Right.
But anybody under 40, you know, when they get most of their news right off that computer now.
If they get news at all, I notice a lot of people don't even pay attention to the news. The younger, perhaps.
Well, and if you want the facts, you go to Facebook, because they only put out people only.
Don't get me started about Facebook.
Yeah, you know what's funny is we're politically we're different in many ways, but we have the greatest conversations on politics and the news in general. And I think the reason that we love doing it so much, we both don't believe a word they say.
Yeah. I think that's the problem. I think conversation is gone. It's more like my side, your side, you know, you guys, those guys. Yeah. It's the split is widening, unfortunately, and I think a little bit more conversation, especially at lower levels, is needed.
Do you know, I often think, though, is it really changing, or the media telling us it's changing? Because I have so many friends who politically I agree nothing with, and we're the best of friends. And sometimes, and if we bring up politics, it's very educated talk, or it's kind of like a good-natured little ribbon or something. Because I don't find the divide or that I see that the media tells me. And but on the other hand, I look at some people; they're nuts now when it comes to their politics.
Yeah, you might be the exception to the rule. It just seems to me that there's a wide gap.
I've been accused of going through life with I think you
those rose-colored glasses.
Those rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
I have been told I will never serve on a jury because the prosecutor knows me, and you know, if somebody stole the car, I'd be saying, well, yeah, but that car does look like, you know, it could have been confusing because both cars have four wheels. It could be a mistake. He could have thought he was hopping into his car.
There you go.
So in other words, I do try to find the best in people, and I still believe that most people are good.
You'd be that one guy, Scott, that would keep the jury in there forever, and they'd all end up hating you.
Right. Oh yeah. But you know what? My wife, she usually lets me go about my life, as in, you know, she's, you know, I know you're not married, but you probably have learned this: women are the stronger sex, and the thing is she very seldom says no to any of my harebrained ideas. But one of them was they were looking for reporters to go to Iraq during the early days of the war. And I said to her, hey, you know, because I have my writing background, including being a reporter, hey, can I go to Iraq and be a reporter? But she knew that I'd go up to some insurgent. Next thing she knew, she'd be seeing me on TV in an orange jumpsuit with somebody standing over me with a sword.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably we would not be having this conversation if she'd let me go.
Penny is a wise woman, Scott. Hold on to her.
Right. So, so how many years you've been at the radio station?
Well, I started with Tom Steele in 90, I would have to say late 97, 98. And I was there until Bill took over, I think about 2002. Then I took off and did construction work for some odd reason. And then I came back in 2006, and I've been there since.
Yeah, because didn't you? So that was about the time that I arrived onto the scene. Hey, tell me, what you know the producer of this show, Todd Pronto. He's kind of a, seedy performer type guy. But what kind of guy was he to work for at the radio station?
Excellent.
Right.
Todd looks out for his people. I think you know that.
Oh, yeah.
He looks out for the people who work with him. He's fair, and he's a smart guy. And he knows when I got back there, it was Eric and Todd, and I tell you, the chemistry they had between them, and what they were doing at the station, it was really rolling pretty good. That's when NASA owned us, and I would have to say those were probably the best years of the station that I can remember. Right. Now Eric left Todd in the position of the boss, and things were good under Todd. Like I said, Todd looks out for the people. He's a smart guy. He knew what we had to do to be successful, and it really helped out. And then of course we hired Devaney, which was another feather in the cap. And I thought things were really popping at those times. So working for Todd was definitely awesome.
Right, as I said, is because he's looked out for us over the years, as in like he's had you were one of his employees, and he drags me wherever he goes, as in he had me do the radio show at the station down here, and he's an upcoming star.
Yes, he is.
And just maybe we're going to find ourselves in Nashville, and maybe even hanging out in Willie's bus or something.
There you go. Now you're talking. But the interesting thing about Todd is, he started out, when I first met Todd, he was working at the Derby Village store. Yeah. And he would come in, he was doing some part-time stuff, and then he came in, and the rest is history.
Right.
It's pretty interesting how it all shook out,
Right. For a while, I was actually trying to be Todd's dating service. He just because Todd was looking, and that weren't going very well, and so I would try to find some single guests to come in too, and that still weren't. If somebody was like 90, that didn't work out. But so as I said, Todd used to. Todd would drag me to the radio station. Then he dragged me here. But then he finally found love. But it would only make sense. He is now dates one of my wife's distant cousins. So he brings me everywhere, and he found love within my wife's family tree.
There you go.
So I guess I was looking too far when I was trying to bring in guests for him.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
And so what do you? You're what, 60 now?
Yes, the new 28, by the way.
New 28. So
Yes.
what do you got? Another 30, 40 years of work?
Pretty much.
Yeah. What do you plan to do? I know you've said you don't want to sit around. You actually like your work.
Well, yeah. You know what? I like to work.
Right.
I'm not one of those people who, time is so precious, and you want to spend some time, doing what you enjoy, but you gotta, but for me, I do enjoy work to a point. I mean, I do like to have some time off.
Right.
But yeah, I plan to work until I'm under there.
Yeah, I don't plan on. I don't want to have to work at the level I have to work now.
Yeah.
But I don't plan on. The one thing. Anytime I think of you, I never met your dog that is now passed on.
Shorty.
But I feel like, Shorty.
Mm-hmm.
Shorty, and they say that people begin to look like their dogs and vice versa. But you're this tall, lanky guy, and Shorty was a basset hound with short little legs,
Yeah.
droop and drooled. I don't know about I've never seen you droop and drool.
Well.
but I heard so much about Shorty that I swear that I knew Shorty.
If the snake pit was still around, you'd probably see me then.
But so do you think you'll be in radio to see any more of the evolution of it? I don't know how much further we can go. We have satellite radio now.
Well, I think the next stage in radio, and I hope it's not true, is digitally created voices. So you don't need a DJ. You could just like punch in an algorithm and boom, you've got a digital DJ. And all you do is punch it in and the radio station will just be this one digital thing with a digital personality playing digital music. And I mean, that is far in the future, I hope. But I see it happening. You know, they have voice tracking now and you know, with like things like Siri and, you know, all that, you know, these talking little bots. I could see it happening. I really can see it happening.
I know I'm getting old now, but I still find Siri and all that a little creepy occasionally. But that's just me. But I've talked to Todd quite a bit since he's in the music world, and he actually agrees with me. Is you don't have to be that talented now to be a successful singer. Because of all the technology, they could make me sound like a singer, and I don't know. I gotta admit is maybe it's just because of our age. I sometimes yearn for the good old days where people actually had to be good.
Yeah, well, you're right about that. Because I was listening to a show on VPR the other day, and they were talking about how newspaper photographers are disappearing. With these new cell phones and these great cameras they have, you know, people are taking pictures, and they're pretty good looking pictures.
WCX just did that.
Yeah,
they're having their reporters take them with their cameras.
Yeah, so photojournalism is changing. So a lot of people are losing those jobs. You know, these are professional photographers. You know, obviously the technology is what's driving it, and who knows where the tech is going to go from here? You know, how many other jobs are going to be replaced or simplified? You know, because of this new tech.
You know when it's funny sometimes. You think about shows that we grew up with. Is some of them seemed far fetched, like whether it was like, for example, Maxwell Smart. And that was my first introduction to cell phones. He had a shoe. Yes. He had a shoe phone. And then the other thing, did you watch the Jetsons growing up?
I'm still waiting for my flying car, by the way.
Yeah, but it's close. But the Jetsons had the teller thing where you could talk. And now, like, I talk to my kids, my grandkids in northern Maine by looking into my computer. That's right off the Jetsons.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I wonder if we're going to be, if anybody's ever going to be able to say to me, beam me up, Scotty, and I'm going to be able, like on Star Trek,
right?
And you're going to be able to, whatever it's called, tell us something.
Teleport. I tell you, I wouldn't be late for interviews.
Oh, that's true.
I was actually expecting a limo. That's what I mean.
Well, that's it. So back to the reason you're here is, I sometimes ask myself, from being a almost local, because as I said, I haven't been here for 5 generations, so I'm not sure if I'm a local or not. I was born and raised here. My father and mother were born and raised here, but some people say 5, 7 generations, that's a local. But sometimes I even wonder why I stay here, and I'm often amazed at people. Like, I don't know how many times I've gone home after having our discussion, our weekly discussion, said to Penny, "You are so smart. There's nothing you can't talk about rational." How come you decided to come to rural Vermont?
It could have been the city. You know, for years I wanted to work in New York City because I was in television. I wanted to get into the movie business, all that stuff. But we used to come up here when I worked at Hartford at Channel 61. We used to come up here, a group of my friends and I, and we go skiing, Okemo or Okemo or Killington, a couple Stowe. Yeah. Once we came up to Jay Peak, and I always loved Vermont. I love rural lifestyle. My dad was from Kentucky, and he lived in Berea, Kentucky, and it's this little rural town in Kentucky with a dirt road. He lived on a dirt road, and my grandma lived in this like shack type of thing, and I love that. Cornfields out there. You wake up in the morning, you hear the rooster, and I love it. I love country life. I like the simple life. I like I like the quiet at night. I'm lying there in bed and I don't hear nothing. It's dark. There's no lights, no light pollution. So it's about lifestyle to me anyway. You know, I've always liked the country lifestyle.
So, we were talking a while ago that even after 20 years, because a lot of times people move here and they actually even forget to look at the beauty, or they stop seeing the beauty. But you said you haven't stopped seeing it yet.
Every morning, I sit out on the deck with a glass of water or a cup of coffee and just sit there and listen to the birds. You know, when it's warm, of course. And listen to the birds and, you know, just look over the landscape. It's beautiful, you know. And like I said, you know, I have some health issues.
Right.
So it makes me, you know, take more focus on those types of things, you know, like when the trees are starting to bloom in the spring, or what the birds are up to. I even watch the little rodents as they crawl into my house. The other day I'm sitting there, the cat's looking weird. I see this, it looked like a mole, honestly, just climb right up my chimney. So it's in the house somewhere.
You know, it was funny. I was down at the campground in Johnson here recently, and I've learned now, because some people like to name drop. I didn't realize the reaction I would get when I name dropped Johnny Rice. Well, come to find out, there was a group of Lowell Westfield people, and they were I'm gonna have to name drop your name more often, because I'm gonna tell you, you need to go to that campground, because you have a fan club down here.
Might get you a free Natty Light.
Yep, that's it. No, I did offer our mutual friend who's a DJ there,
Mr. Loud.
Yeah, DJ Loud. I did suggest that he brings you down to that campground. You might be able to belt out a couple songs for them. Are you a singer?
No, I've never sang in my life.
No.
I mean, and when I have, it doesn't get met with very.
Yeah, but
let's leave the singing to the professionals.
You have a voice that would make a great drinking song.
That maybe, yes. I've sung 100 bottles of beer on the wall many times. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're about ready to wrap up. What more? Is there anything else you want to tell the world about yourself? Because most people never get to see you. You're like this shadow in the background behind the mic.
That's what I'm all about, Scott. I'm not, you know, I've never been a self-promoter. You know, I was very shy when I was younger. I mean, very shy. So, you know, I never really sought a lot of attention, and I kind of brought that into my adult life.
Right.
You know, I like quietness. I on the air, I do my thing, and then when I'm gone, I'm done.
Yeah,
that's it. You know, no more. John Rice is home. He's put his slippers on and
were you
in front of the TV.
Were you a kind of guy like me who, like, when you knew you had to do a oral presentation, did that like send shivers through you or not?
I don't think so. No. You know what? That's one thing I'd have to say is when I'm asked to perform, I'll go up and perform.
Oh.
And you know what? I give that credit to my drum corps days. I was a shoreliner. I was a bridgeman. And, you know, you're out there under the lights. You got the stands filled with people, and, you know, you're marching and maneuvering and stuff, and you can't make mistakes. And that kind of, you know, that experience also helped me get out of my shell as a young man. Right. And as far as, like, performing on a stage, when the lights come on, so does John.
Do you know that I published my first book about 15 years ago, and I virtually had to have my publisher hold my hand at the first interview?
Really?
Because I cringed at public speaking. And once, and this is a funny thing to say, once I realized I would never be one of these polished people who sound so perfect, it became easy.
Yeah.
Because I'm not perfect. I'm a horribly flawed person, and you editing me would agree that I listen to you when you do it. It comes out perfect.
I don't know.
Very little editing, and me, no matter how many shows I do, I stick my foot in my mouth, and occasionally I'm able to put both of them in my mouth. And God forbid that I've been able to manage to stay away from hot mics, because hot mics are anywhere today, and you never know what you're going to be caught saying.
Oh, so true. Oh, so true, Scott.
Hey, it was great having you on, and I'm still contemplating who my next guest is going to be on on my radio show because actually I remember last week you had an outstanding guest. No, I had an outstanding guest.
It was a local author, I believe.
Yeah, it was me.
Yes, it was Scott Wheeler.
Yes, you turned
the famous Scott Wheeler.
You turned the tables on me
That's right.
and talked about my my new history book, and they should be arriving today, so you'll have one in your hands.
Excellent, excellent. And with the Newport Centennial, it's like a perfect marriage of
Yes,
a
it
book
is.
and event.
Yep. Hey, it was great having you on, and we'll be seeing each other again for the next 20 years up at the radio station, unless the producer of this show, the famous Todd Peranto, brings us on the road with him.
I'm looking forward to being on the road. Definitely.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
We're gonna get a Willie bus. Todd's gonna get a Willie bus.
You know what? Why not?
All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Scott.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.